Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Health Multiverse. I'm HB here with my co-host LB, and today we are talking Other Strong Ladies, which is basically all of the Disney heroines that we did not have time to talk about and dive into in full episodes of for season 1 of our podcast. We are also feeling a little melancholy because we have already recorded this episode. And it got lost in the ether of Zoom somewhere. LB recorded it, and then when she went to edit it, it was not there. There were 3 minutes of our recording, and the rest of it was gone. Same thing happened to our Raya episode. So I'm recording this one with fingers crossed that nothing bad happens, knock on wood. And it was a fantastic episode, and I hope that we're able to do it justice by re-recording today and using our original show notes. We always go off script. We don't really use a script at all. We kind of just use our show notes as a guide and then discuss. So our episodes are always very organic, and we just have kind of like an outline that we follow to make sure that we hit all the points we want to hit. So again, hopefully this episode is better than the last one that we recorded. That's what I keep telling myself to make myself feel better about needing to record it. So without further ado, let's try this again, LB.
Woo! If you're hearing this, then things went well. So all good things. All good things.
But here are the characters that we're talking about today. These are our other strong ladies. We've got Tinkerbell and Wendy from Peter Pan, Jane Porter from Tarzan, Vanellope Von Schweetz from Wreck-It Ralph, Captain Amelia from Treasure Planet, which I have still never seen, even though we recorded this a while ago. Princess Eilonwy from the Black Cauldron, Anastasia from Anastasia. Is that everyone? And I think that's everybody.
That's everybody.
Yeah, if there's anyone that we don't talk about that you want to hear about, just email us, let us know, send us a message on Instagram. We'll try to fit your heroine in to our next season, but keep in mind this was solely focused on Disney, so we will do our best to get your character seen and heard or talked about.
Yeah.
So shall we start with Peter Pan?
Let's start with Peter Pan. Are we doing this accent the whole time?
No.
Thank God. I can't do accents. Yes, so we're going to talk about Tinkerbell and Wendy, which I recently rewatched Peter Pan, I think in prep for recording this episode, and I forgot how certain parts of it are very, very bad in terms of stereotypes and representation, but also I forgot how much I actually kind of like the movie, specifically like Wendy and Tinkerbell. But for Wendy, I like that she is imaginative, she's a storyteller, she has so much childlike wonder, she's very kind and loving, and she's clearly the eldest daughter, which I can relate to, because she just wants to be a kid, but her dad is rushing her to grow up. Also, fuck the dad. He was so, I mean, he had his own little personal growth throughout the movie, but like he was so annoying. But like, you can no longer sleep in the nursery, and no more dogs for nursemaids. And I was like, no, Nana.
Nana was perfect. Nana was perfect and
Nana was
did nothing wrong. Yeah,
did nothing wrong. A sweet, sweet, darling angel, and she could run that household better than anyone. I was gonna say any man, but really just anyone. For me, I didn't really like Tinkerbell in the old Peter Pan movies, but I really liked her when she got her own movies, like in the early 2000s or 2010s or something like that, because I'm guessing you haven't seen those, so I'll give like a little
I am
Little
not.
spoilers. Yeah. So little spoilers is basically it's like her origin story about how she becomes Tinkerbell.
Mhm.
And in the movie, like she arrives into the world and basically in Pixie Hollow on her like birthday, arrival day, I don't know. She has to like pick all of these. There's a circle of like different objects, and the one that you pick determines like which pixie faction you go into. So there's like water pixies and fire pixies, sun pixie, plant pixies, the ones that talk to the insects, and oh, like wind pixies, and they're like super cool. And the like head pixie of that little group is kind of a jerk to Tinkerbell, because Tinkerbell, I believe, picks up like a thimble or something to do with the Tinkerers, and that's a predominantly male pixie area, I guess. And also it's just like not as cool as like, apparently not as cool as like the fire or whatever. So anyway, the movie is all about her trying to prove that she could become a different kind of pixie, basically, where she like gets help from all the other different pixies in like the different whatchamacallits, and they show her basically the ropes, and they're very supportive overall, and they're like, if you want to become a sun fairy, here's what we do. We throw fire into the sky and that creates the sun or something. I don't remember. um but anyway, she tries it out with a bunch of different things. It doesn't work out. In her trying to become something that she's not, chaos ensues. And then the moral of the story is that like you're the things that make you different are the things that make you you, and that's not a bad thing. Embrace it, be yourself. um
But all of that you just said, I remember the first time we recorded this too, like it reminds me of like in high school when you're going through that phase of like trying to prove to other people how cool you are.
yeah, yeah,
Or that like, like uh, this really unique thing about me that I like, I'm hiding it because I don't want people to judge it, and I'm going to pretend I like the things that you like. But then in the end, we always realize like actually this really unique thing that I've been hiding is actually what makes me me and makes me special, and uh I will feel better just not hiding it and pursuing that thing. So I do like that about the Tinkerbell stuff. I had no idea that that's
yeah,
how that
yeah.
was.
It's kind of like yeah, your high school comment reminded me of like, going from like different clique or different friend group and trying to fit in with like the quote unquote cool people. But like I think it's more important to pivot your energy toward the people that accept you for you, rather than like trying to like shape shift and chameleon yourself into fitting into another group. I think not only is that so much less work, like mental and emotional energy on your part, but then you also make like genuine authentic connections and friendships with people. I mean, we've talked so much on this podcast about belonging, and I think, in every instance, it really comes down to like, you always say this, like the people. What is it? This is like your motto, your mantra, and I love it, and I can't believe I'm forgetting it right now.
Was it the people who are meant to the people who are for you, and the people who are not, or something like that? I don't
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah. Exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I look back on my time in high school, and I actually had a pretty, like, comparatively, because I went to a performing arts school, my high school life was not as hard as I feel like some people,
Mm-hmm.
because our cliques were really like, it was the dancers and it was the drama people, and like, it was more like based on what your major was and what your art focus was, rather than like cheerleaders and footballs and cool people.
Yeah.
But we still had cliques, and there were still cool people, and there were like so like I was a self-proclaimed emo kid in high school. Like I dyed my hair black, I straightened my hair every day. I always wore a pop of color though, because if you know me, you also know that about me. I would wear like bright eyeliner, bright jewelry, gaudy like, like bright pink and green, and I haven't changed much. Anyway, yeah. But I remember the feeling of trying to fit in with groups of people who didn't appreciate me. And I distinctly remember how much work it took to try to be something that I wasn't. It's a lot of work. And I got really lucky. I found a really awesome group of friends. So like my freshman year, I was hanging out with all these kids and they all dropped out they literally all dropped out my sophomore year. So my whole friend group left the performing arts school. Some of them like went to like our virtual high school to get like a digital GED or whatever. Some of them just didn't want to be in the performing arts school anymore. So like my whole friend group left and I was like left alone. However, I had been going to the same school since the 4th grade. So I still like kind of knew everyone. It's just that my friend group had left. And I just made friends with new people and it was genuine. And that was what felt good about it. It wasn't like I forced myself into fitting a mold. It was very much like we found each other because we were the outcasts, essentially. Like that's how it goes, right? And it felt so much better than like trying, because I remember trying so hard to be like, I'm gonna be friends with these people. So yeah. So I'm glad that that is something that we get from the Tinkerbell movies, because I had no idea.
Yeah. So you should watch them.
I don't know. I feel like I got everything I need out of them from this conversation.
Fair. That's fine.
But anyway, going back to what you said at the very start of the conversation about Peter Pan being like a bit problematic, it has the same intro as Pocahontas and Aladdin about the depictions and how they are not okay. They were not okay then and they're not okay now, but they're not removing the content because it allows us to have conversations about, about this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you brought this up before in our other conversation, but like to talk about Tiger Lily, and the depiction of the Native American people, even though it was very problematic, I do think that Tiger Lily was an amazing character.
Yeah, I do remember saying that I really admired her because Captain Hook is like screaming in her face and she's just like, I'm not telling you anything. She doesn't say anything. She just sticks her nose up at him. And if anyone did that to me, I would just instantly start crying. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I will tell you anything you want to know. Just stop yelling at me. I'd be the worst, like, hostage because I would just give them anything. I'd be like, yeah, please stop yelling at me.
So also, basically going back to Tinkerbell, I have so many thoughts about Tinkerbell. Our first glimpse of Tinkerbell, we get a very graphic representation of negative body image. In Tinkerbell. So essentially she flies in, she and Peter Pan have come to get his shadow, and it's the shadow is in the home of the Darlings. And Tinkerbell sees this mirror. It's like a compact or just a mirror. Maybe it's just an upright facing mirror sitting on a dresser. And she flies past it. And her first interaction with it, she's like, ooh, what's this? And she starts off looking at herself with admiration. And she's sort of like twirling around and having a good look at her, like her little hips, her little waist, whatever. And then it quickly turns into fear and disgust. Like with a spin of her body, she suddenly starts looking at herself negatively. And so you can distinctly see her take her hands outside of her hips, and then she narrows her hands in front of her hips, like, I want my hips to be smaller, basically, like, this is how big my hips are. And she sort of does that as like a representation of like, oh my gosh, look at how my body is shaped, basically. Which I think every woman has had a moment of that in the mirror. And then to fast forward a little bit, Peter Pan and his mindlessness, and I don't know if we need to go into how much of a jerk he is on this episode, but I will just say it. He treats both Tinkerbell and Wendy like crap the whole time. But he's
knocks so rude.
So rude. He knocks Tinkerbell into a drawer, and she gets stuck in there, and she tries to fly out of the keyhole of the drawer, but her hips are the reason that she can't get out. Like, she's trying to get out of the keyhole, and her hips are what are like holding her in the drawer. So it's another example of like vividly seeing her negative body image and then seeing how it's impacting her negatively in the fact that like, oh, I can't do this thing because my hips are too big. However, she turns around, she's super resourceful. She uses scissors to pry herself out of the drawer. She gets out, and that's the end of it. But I do just think like, I think it's just such a graphic representation of like what women go through and what we're taught to think about ourselves and our bodies. And it's just, I don't think I've ever seen body image as graphically represented as I had in that moment watching Peter Pan. Like, I didn't notice it as a kid. It was this rewatch where I was like, this, and I've seen memes of it too, so I was looking out for it. But like, this is a graphic representation. Like, you can see it plain. There's no alluding to it. There's no metaphor. It's pure, I am upset that my hips are so big. And it's wild to me.
I know the things that, I mean, the things that were acceptable, right, in children's movies, not even just back then. Like, there are a lot of things even just 5-10 years ago that we look at now and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe this made it into the movie, or that this was even an idea to have in the movie, because it can be so problematic. And I think the reason why we like to highlight these kinds of things is because as children, we know that children are very impressionable. We're sponges. We're just absorbing a lot of things in the world, and we get a lot of that through media, through movies, through TV shows, through a lot of external things, because we don't quite yet understand our inner world, right? So we're looking for all of those external cues and messages, and there are a lot of subliminal messages that we may unconsciously pick up on as a kid, but this one was like, even if I didn't realize it as a even if I didn't realize this particular moment as like one of the things contributing to my own self-perception and negative view of like my body, when you've seen it enough times as a kid, it like kind of gets drilled into your brain of like, oh, if my hips are bigger, then the like unconscious connection is that that's bad, because even though it might not be as silly as getting trapped in a drawer or something, it's going to be like,
Right.
oh, this is just unattractive, or this is just bad.
Like, there is something wrong with me for having big hips, right?
Yeah.
And there's absolutely not, of course. And I think that the way it's hammered in so hard in society is like, Tinkerbell is a fairy. She's like the smallest anything can be, like teeny tiny, and yet this teeny tiny being is still obsessing over I guess maybe she had never seen a mirror before, so like her first time looking in a mirror, she's like, wow, these hips are bigger than I thought they were, or whatever. And you kind of see that like highlight of maybe it's comparison, or maybe it's like comparing herself to the other fairies. Like, I don't think fairies have hips that are this big or whatever, but it makes me wonder like what women were going through in that time period in the 50s when this movie was released. And I think comparing it to like now watching this movie, I do think there's a lot more of a body neutrality view on things, body positive view on things, where people can see this, and instead of internalizing it, they'll say, poor Tink, I'm so sorry that she feels that way about her body. Whereas like, I'm not looking at it and seeing Tinkerbell and thinking like, dang, if Tinkerbell is upset about how big her hips are, I should be upset about how big my hips are. Like, I think there's a separation in media a little bit now because of the movements that we have going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I am grateful to live in a society where we've had so many women be outspoken about how not okay this is. And not just women. I mean, men talk about it too. And they have their own body image issues in movies, definitely in TV shows, that we don't necessarily need to get into, but they are definitely affected by it as well. And I am glad that we have progressed so much to, like you said, have a more body neutral or body positive outlook. So that when we see these kinds of things, or when fat jokes get made in media, it's no longer an internalizing thing, and we're able to be like, oop, hold it off at arm's length, don't love that, and it's not for me, instead of being
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like if they're making jokes about it, then people are going to make jokes about me, and so I shouldn't look like this or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
And I'm also saying that from a place of privilege and having done the work to unlearn a lot of things. So there may
Hmm.
still be people, you might be sitting listening to this and be like, I'm not able to separate myself from those things yet. And my hope is that you're able to do some of the unlearning of fat phobia and the unlearning of diet culture and the unlearning of
Hmm.
thin equaling good and all of this stuff and fat equaling bad. Like there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done. And I've done a lot of that work, and so have you. And I think that might be contributing to the separation that we have. So there might
Mm.
be people listening. I just want to put that disclaimer on too. Like if you're not there yet, that's okay.
Yes, yes.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of unlearning to be done. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for disclaiming that too, because that is very important, wherever you are in your journey. And that's what we try to do also in this podcast, is really just talk to, encourage, and support people on any part of their journey. If you're just starting out, if you've come a long way and you're kind of where we are, or even if you're in that in between and you're not quite there, but that's something you're reaching toward, just know that it takes time. Because I think we talk about this a lot too on this podcast, is about how so much of social media is before and afters, and you don't see the hard work that kind of comes um, in the middle. And it's great to see the progress and transformations that people have, but it's also sometimes not realistic because we're getting just snapshots of two things and not the full picture. And that also creates unrealistic expectations where they think it's just going to be like, boom, boom, cool, I did it.
Yeah. And also that afters are not always like afters are not an after. After is just a
Yes, yes,
continuance of where you are now.
exactly. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good point.
But speaking of journeys and being on the other side of things, another thing about Tinkerbell that I resonated with, because I was in a really not great place when I rewatched this episode, or when I rewatched Peter Pan for this episode, um, I learned a little bit about myself and about my relationship to comparison and jealousy.
Mm,
And the journey that I'm on in that. And I think it's funny that Tinkerbell is green, because green is sort of the color of envy and jealousy. Like when you think
mm,
of it in media, like that's sort of like the color jealousy comes up as. And we see Tinkerbell very, very jealous of Wendy throughout the whole movie. She's trying to sabotage her, she's trying to hurt her. And I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying that what she did was okay. But what I am seeing is someone who is so affected by the presence of this other woman,
mm-hmm,
and is so jealous that Peter Pan is giving Wendy attention instead of her. I resonated with that a lot. And I'm not going to go into like super big details about it, but it reminded me a lot of the relationship I was in earlier this year that I ended for these reasons. But there are particular people in my life who I have found myself comparing myself to. And
mm-hmm,
I'm not being mean to the Peter Pan in the situation. I'm not being mean to the Wendy in the situation. I'm actually being mean to the Tinkerbell in the situation. Like if I'm Tinkerbell, I'm actually being like really mean to myself. So I'm not being mean to the other two parties. I internalize and compare myself, and then I'm mean to myself the way that
mm-hmm,
Tinkerbell was being mean to Wendy. And so watching this sort of helped me realize, like, girl, you need to get out of this and stop comparing yourself to this other person. Like, it's not doing you any good. It's not doing you any service. You're just hurting yourself in the end, by looking at this Wendy person and saying, like, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as her. I'm not as pretty as her. I'm not as smart as her. Peter Pan is giving her all the attention, not paying any attention to me. And like, I internalized that and realized, like, this jealousy is not serving anyone. It's certainly not
mm-hmm,
serving me. And also, the other thing I want to say about jealousy is that you should listen to what jealousy is teaching you about yourself. Because when you are feeling envious of someone else or jealous of someone else, it is you directly wanting something that they may, or like, that they might have that you don't, or you perceive that they have that you don't. And for me, it was a little bit about body image comparison, and it was a little bit about the success that this person has in the communities that I'm in. Like, they have more followers, they have more attention, they get all the praise, and I'm sitting here like, where's all my praise, you know? And it's
Right.
not, but it's teaching me I'm just feeling jealous because I perceive this person to be more successful than me, and that makes me feel a certain way about myself. So just taking that, taking a breath, and just knowing that this person existing and having the things that I might want and having a certain body type and all of these things, it takes nothing away from me that this person exists. Like, I am not a worse person. I'm not less attractive. I'm not never going to be successful just because this person has these things. I can have them too. I am happy. I do not need to change who I am. And so I'm trying to separate myself from that jealousy. And that is a journey that I'm on personally right now. And that watching Peter Pan for the purposes of this episode kind of taught me. So that's where we are with jealousy.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad I'm so glad you said that. Because I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, even outside of like romantic relationships or dating. I think even just like personally for myself, I grew up in spaces where like I don't know, there was this like unspoken rule that like you had to compete with other women, that like
Mm,
if a guy was dating another girl, then that, like you said, that took something away from you. Like there was this idea that there wasn't enough to go around. And I think women or people just in general kind of go through that, especially as we are approaching our 30s or in our 30s, approaching our 40s, right? About how like you need to settle down, you need to start having kids, like look at all these other people. But I think the most important thing in regard to that kind of a timeline is that there is no deadline. There really is no timeline. It's whatever timing is yours that is perfect for you. Just because someone else has a different checklist or different priority or has different priorities doesn't mean that their life or whatever is somehow better than yours. Like just because someone has known maybe for a really long time that they wanted kids and wanted to have married what that maybe they've wanted to have kids and be married and like do that whole thing for a while, and that's their journey, that's their path, that's great. And if you're on the other side of that, like myself, you're like, I don't want that, at least not right now, that's fine too. The societal idea that like life has to follow XYZ in order to get to whatever is, as we're learning, at least from in our little corner of social media and the world, is it's not that's not the one right way. You know,
yeah,
you I was gonna make a really cheesy analogy to like Merida, but hey, this is what this podcast is all about. Like you get to
sure.
choose. You get to choose your destiny. You get to choose your fate. You have a say in how parts of your life go, you know? So,
Yeah.
um yeah, just because someone is where you want to be doesn't mean them having gotten there before you takes anything away from you or means that you're doing something wrong. I think it's another cliche, but really a lot of it is in the journey. It's not about the destination. Because I think when we like skip ahead and get where we want to go as quickly as possible, one, we may find out that we're not the person that we needed to be in order to really love and embrace the thing we thought we wanted. But then also we miss out on a lot of learning opportunities. And I think when we can look at life as a series of like learning opportunities, or my friend likes to put it as like science experiments, just experiments, it makes it a lot easier than having to feel like I need to rush through life to get to this one goal or this one outcome or whatever. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple things to say to that. One, to go to what your very first point that you were saying. One of my best friends who was on the episode for our Jasmine episode, Ronnie, um,
Ah.
she and I have had this conversation before a lot. Actually, we talked about it when I first started my podcast, Love Your Bod, which was a long time ago, 2017. We talked about it in my podcast episode with her. about this concept of one woman on top is kind of what we
Mm.
called it. Basically, that like when you're a woman and you enter a room full of other women, society sort of teaches us that one of those women is the best woman, or you have to try to fight to be the best woman in the room. You have to be the prettiest, the strongest, the smartest. And I think the Barbie movie kind of does a good job of like fleshing that out and sort of
Dismantling. Yeah.
and dismantling that idea that like it's a womanhood should be about community with other women, because we all struggle with body image, we all struggle with these things, but I feel like society teaches us, especially in those like teen movies, and to go back to what we were talking about before, with the Tinkerbell TV show and also Tinkerbell's jealousy, it's like if someone has like there's one popular girl in school, everyone wants to be like her, everyone starts dressing like her, everyone starts to do that thing. And it's like we're all like clawing to be the popular girl, and then what's the popular girl think? She doesn't know she's the popular girl. She's thinking like, oh, or she has to maintain that, right? And it's just like this pressure to just like never stop trying to be the woman on top, and it's just
Right.
so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, so to take all that pressure off and just sort of be like in community with women is a lot easier than competing with them. So that was thought number one. Um, thought number two, about timelines, though, I will
Mm.
say that as a woman in my mid 30s, and I can't believe I'm saying that because I do not feel like I'm in my mid 30s at all. Like, what does that even mean? I have been feeling the pressure. Like, I'm in a place of like, I don't really want kids right now. That's not to say I never want kids, but I am not partnered. I would not be able to give a child a really good life right now, like with the way that
Mhm.
I live my life. Um, but there's that like clock, the biological clock that you always hear
Mm.
about that's ticking. And I listened to this podcast. It's a podcast I listened to called Finding Mr. Hyde. It's about dating, if anyone is looking for a dating podcast. But they had a fertility expert on, and he was talking about like the possibilities of having kids at different ages, and like the best age to have your eggs frozen if you want to like freeze your eggs for future to have children in the future. First of all, it's so expensive, it feels very inaccessible to someone like me who is like single and doesn't know if she wants kids. It's very inaccessible
Mhm.
in terms of price. But the other thing is that he said that 38 is like, after 38 is when your eggs start to deteriorate in value, and that's only 4 years away from me. And so like
Mm.
that felt really scary and felt like a lot of pressure. And like you were saying, like there's no such thing as a perfect timeline. But as we get older, it does get scarier. And I just want to
Yeah.
acknowledge that too, of
Yeah.
like, of course, take things at your own time, and what's meant for you, you can work towards it and try your best and control what you have control over. But I can't control if I'm, going to be able to do like I can't control uh that process of my life, because that unfortunately is like a nature versus like what I want sort of thing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it does. I have a question though. You said deteriorates in value. What does that mean?
Oh yeah, so basically like so like your eggs are of the same quality, I guess,
Mm.
from when you are young until you are 38. Like there's
Okay.
no difference, for most women. I'm going to say for most women or people who have uteruses. Um
Yeah.
and so for most people with uteruses, the eggs start to deteriorate in value after 38, which just means that's when you're more likely to have birth defects, or it will be harder to become pregnant and that kind of thing. So it's basically about the quality of
Mm.
your eggs, which is why it's harder to get pregnant after you start reaching a certain age. And there are some people who are capable of having children into their late 40s. This particular clinic that they were interviewing, and I'll just link the episode in the show notes of this, but the particular clinic that they were talking about, and they said that they go up pretty high. Like they'll check your egg count, and they'll check something else about the quality of your eggs that I can't remember. It was big words. Um, and if you are older than like 44, they won't even bother to freeze them, because there's very little there's high risk and little chance that you will have a child from what they take from you
Oh
after
wow.
44. Yeah. And so my brain was like, that's only 10 years from now. What if I'm not, like, anyway,
Yeah.
the spiral happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like deteriorating in value or not being best of quality just means like once you reach a certain age, your eggs start, they're old. They've been in your body for like, you're born with all the eggs you're going to have, which is kind of wild to me also.
So weird.
They're just sitting in there. I think that's what he said. Take everything I'm saying and just listen to that episode because I don't know I am not a fertility expert. I'm just saying things that I heard that freaked me out about having kids. So
it freaked me out. Yeah.
So if you are interested in learning more, I'm just regurgitating the information that I learned where I was sort of like, wow, timelines are a real, like, I was like, we always talk about like, take your time, what will happen for you is whatever. But there are some things that are completely out of your control, and that is one of them. And yeah.
No, I think thank you for bringing that up. That is a really good point. I think when we're talking about the timelines that we typically talk about, it's more about dismantling the societal expectations about how life is supposed to go to school, get a degree, get a big girl job, get married, have kids, retire. It doesn't have to be that way, and it doesn't have to be that way before you're 30. I don't know why. Like, I don't understand the idea or concept or unspoken rule that like when you turn 18 and go to college, you have to pick the thing and you have to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And then in your mid 20s, it's all about settling down and having those kids. And it's like, at what point in what decade do we get a chance to learn anything about ourselves? Right. And that's something I'm trying to embrace and accept about my 20s, because I'm in my late 20s now, which is wild to say because I too do not feel 28. I'm not going to say 18. I was a very different person at 18 and we've come so far, thank God. I just, that number has yet to really like sink in. On one hand, it's like, okay, it's just a number, whatever. But then on the other, it's like, yeah, I'm almost 30. Like I what I'm embracing about my 20s is that this has been a time to really, really learn things about myself. I think if I had followed and forced myself to follow the societally accepted or what my environments and what my parents and teachers and pastors and whatever were telling me life was supposed to be like, I would not be the person I am. And I love who I am. I love the person I've become and the things that I've learned and how much I have grown. Because had I not had the thank you. Had I not had the opportunity and the time to like do all of this work and all of this self-reflection, I would not have become a cycle breaker. I would have continued a lot of the cycles that harmed me. And now I'm becoming the kind of person that doesn't want to continue those cycles, that will speak up about those cycles and encourage other people to break them. So all of that to say, just what you were saying, HB, what's meant for you will not pass you by, which is a really, really hard mantra or affirmation, motto, cliche, or whatever you want to call it, to accept for a lot of people who might have a little anxiety about the timeline and about life and about what it's supposed to look like and feel like and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I also want to say that I also love the person who you are. So I'm glad that you've done all the work to break the cycle. And I'm equally as proud of you. And also, I think that the conversation we're having is a good segue into talking about the theme of Peter Pan of like not wanting to grow up because, aging is definitely, again, something that women are sort of taught, like the younger you are, the more desirable you are, the better you are, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I do think that it's interesting that we sort of get to see how Peter Pan is kind of like a jerk. And because he never grew up, he's stuck in this like, it's not just childlike mentality, but it's like an immature mentality.
It's childish.
Yes. Yeah. Because like there's a difference between childlike wonder and then like acting like a asshole.
Or just this is a very strong word, but he's very ignorant, the way that he speaks to Wendy. And he's like, girls talk too much. Or Wendy's like, she's trying to introduce herself and be polite. And yeah, she's a little chatty, but he's like, just Wendy is fine. And he's like shutting her down. He's very he's very dismissive. But I do think there's a difference between childlike, which is what Wendy is. Like she is able to play pretend and have fun and, you know, engage with her younger brothers and entertain them. So she's able to drop into that like childlike wonder, but then there's a difference in being childish where you're acting like a child, you're acting immature, you know. So
Yeah,
it
you
is
haven't learned the things that you need to learn to like contribute to society.
yeah, exactly. Like I don't know, another way that I could imagine it is like a full grown adult being able to like play pretend with kids, whether it's their kids or nieces and nephews or just like, you
Or
know,
being their nanny, which is
or being their
me.
yeah. And then there's a difference in like still acting like a child and expecting people to cater to you and like expecting your parents to take care of you, not having learned how to, you know, take care of yourself. So um I do think that's a nice segue because there's this Peter Pan has this idea that growing up is um bad in some kind of way because you lose that childlike wonder. But I think what we see in Wendy, which is something I really love about her, is that she's growing, she's getting older, but she's able to handle the both, and she's getting older and she's still allowing for that childlike wonder, imagination, joy, you know, things like that to she's not letting it go. And that's something I also really like about how far we've come in society is that we're no longer telling adults to stop loving the things that they do. You know, like, yeah, Disney adults get like a bad rap. Swifties like myself get kind of a bad rap, but like think of all the people who dress up and watch football and go to the stadiums and scream or scream at the TV. Like, I don't see how that's any different. It's just that your, I don't know, innate childlike joy has shifted into a different thing that's not animated. Like, congratulations. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But um you haven't mentioned what you like about Wendy.
Yeah, so very similar things to what we've been talking about. Like I really appreciate her she's so caring and kind, and she seems so intentional about her approach to life. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because she's so mature, and the kids even refer to her the Lost Boys even refer to her as mother. Like Peter Pan's like, I brought you a mother, and it's like, I thought I was not gonna grow up, and yet here you are taking me to be these kids' mother. Like Neverland is supposed to be about anyway. Um, but she embraces that, and I think she has this like natural sort of like caring and mature sort of like mother-like nature. Um, and I think that that is really sweet, and it is sweet to know that you can be both. You can be caring and kind and nurturing and also still have that childlike wonder. And it's like I see myself in that a lot as a nanny, as someone who takes care of other people's children for a living. It's like I kind of have to be their mother and their best friend. I have to like, you know, I have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to get down on the ground and play pretend with them, but also make sure that they do their homework and eat lunch. Like I have to do
Yeah.
like, you know, um, and I really, yeah, I really like that about her. Her whole nature is just like her whole vibes are just like really sweet,
Mm-hmm.
and I pretty much like everything about her.
Yeah.
Even
And
when
I like
Tinkerbell is being mean to her, even when Tinkerbell is like, you know, sabotaging her and being cruel, she approaches it with kindness. And I'm like,
yeah.
wow, you just
Yeah.
knew that you just know that she's really going through it.
Yeah. Yeah, she's cute. And I like her relationship with her mom. I think you made a note of this when the mom comes
Oh
in because
yeah.
they're getting ready to leave and Wendy's like, "Oh, mother, you look so beautiful." And I'm like,
I
"Oh, that's
know.
so cute."
And her mother just does a little twirl in her dress, and it's like, I repurposed my doo-doo-doo from da-da-da. And they're just like chit-chatting about how beautiful her mother is. And I was like, oh, we don't see squishy mother-daughter relationships like this very much. And it's so
I
brief,
know.
but it's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cute. So another heroine on our list is Jane Porter from Tarzan. I I love her so much. She's just, I mean, what's not to love? She's smart, she's adventurous, and I love the way that she has so much respect for nature. And the reason why she's in the jungle with her father and Clayton, which I think that in our original recording, I even asked the question of like, why is he there? Like, how did they get him of all people? Because it does not match.
I'm sure he weaseled his way in and was like, I'm gonna go on this mission with them. I'm gonna apply because I'm the greatest, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, he gives off Gaston vibes. But I like that the way that she wants to study gorillas is in such a respectful manner, because she's not seeing these animals as lesser than in any kind of way. She's like, you have your own culture and system, and I'm going to appreciate it as closely as you'll let me, and I'm going to try and not cross any boundaries. She's also so pretty. It's just like
she's very pretty.
So
I kind of imagine
pretty.
like, I think that if we did a live action Tarzan, a younger Emily Blunt would be perfect to play Jane.
Oh,
That's kind of what I picture in my head. But I agree with you on everything that you've said. My most vivid memory of Tarzan, and I think this is for everyone, like I'm pretty sure that if you think of Tarzan, you immediately think of Phil Collins and how he did not have to go so hard on the soundtrack, make you cry instantly, like whenever you hear any of the songs. Like that soundtrack is like, I'm gonna make the most heartbreaking music about gorilla families, and like, oh, it's just like, what? Who asked for this? I mean, I'm glad it exists, but damn. But the like Jane, again, speaking of a great parent relationship, her relationship with her father is adorable and like unmatched. They're just so cute. They have a moment when she's like drawing Tarzan, and like she's drawing him on the chalkboard, and she just like starts looking into his eyes, and her dad is like, I'm gonna give you to a moment.
He's like, should I leave you in the chalkboard alone?
Yeah, it was so funny. Like I like that to me is it's so funny. But yeah, everything about Jane, so kind-hearted. I think she's incredibly underrated. Even me, like I had not thought about her until we decided to talk about her for this podcast, just as like one of the other ladies. But I think one of the really cool things about her is also her willingness to learn. She's a Disney heroine who is like incredibly smart. She's also an artist, which is really cool. Like she's really great at art, and she's also a dork, which I think is kind of like, she's not just like awkward and bumbly, but she's also just like truly a nerd for nature, which is really cool too. It's like she knows a lot, and she bonds with the animals, and it's her relationship to nature and to others is really, really beautiful in the film. And I think the best part is like at the end when she decides to stay, because I think the whole plot of the movie is like they discover Tarzan, they're trying to pull him away from how he was brought up in the forest with his apes, and they're like, we're going to take you back to England, we're going to teach you how to be a human and do all the things that we do, walk up straight and wear suits and all this stuff. And by the end of the movie, her journey has sort of been to like untangle all of that and be like, I want to be a wild nature girl, I want to learn how to swing, I want to learn how to swing on vines and slide on tree trunks and like all this stuff. And like by the end, she totally fully embraces it. So much so that she's even learning how to speak the ape language. And the appreciation, like you've said before, she has the appreciation for nature. It can almost be like an appreciation for the culture that he was like brought up in, like the ape culture, if I can say that. Like, that she just like brings to it this like calm curiosity, and it doesn't feel like she's trying to appropriate, or it doesn't feel like she's trying to take over. It just feels like she loves Tarzan and loves nature, and it's like these two of her things come together, and it just winds up being the perfect ending. Yeah.
I really like what you said too about how she's so smart but she's still willing to learn, and I think that's something that I like about her and Tarzan's relationship is that they learn from each other. Like it, and this is a mindset that, you know, kind of fueled colonialism in thinking that there is one better culture or one better way of living. And that has to be the dominant, and you know, the everyone has to acclimate to this certain way of living. But what I love about Jane is that she doesn't assert, yes, she's teaching Tarzan about being, you know, what it means to live like a human and walk and speak like one, but she's also learning a lot from him. It's like they're both learning from each other and appreciating the things, and then like kind of like taking what fits and leaving what doesn't, but not in like a because I'm more civilized and I'm better than you. It's just like a, you know, it's a merging of two cultures. And I think coming from kind of like a mixed household, there's a little bit of a culture clash that can happen sometimes. But I think what's important is that if you love the person, you're going to love all of them, their background, their history, who they are, where they come from. You can't like, you know, separate a person from that. I also like to think that she this was her expedition, and the only reason, not like the only reason why her dad came along, was it seems like, I mean, it seems like they got a lot of funding. It seems like the dad maybe has been doing this for a while. His name is Archimedes, before I forget that. I would like to think that he just put his name on the expedition, but it was really Jane's idea. And this was Jane's thing, but because, you know, back then there weren't a lot of women in science. And so he was like, my daughter has a really great idea and she's so smart and amazing. And I'm just gonna help her out in this way. Like peak allyship, dad. Way to go. Still have questions about how you got Clayton on board, but it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I have a lot of favorite quotes from this movie. I'm going to say a couple of them. One is Tarzan to his ape dad, whose name I forget. I did not write it down. Kerchak. Yes, thank you. It's when Tarzan has sort of discovered the camp, and I don't think he's like quite in love with Jane yet, but he like wants to bring her around and sort of says, why are you threatened by anyone different than you? And of course, Kerchak has a lot of reason to be fearful of the humans, especially Clayton, because he does have negative intentions. But as we see from like Jane and her father, it's like there is good too. So
Yeah.
thought that was interesting. And then another quote is by her dad, Archimedes too. I don't know when this happens, but there's a point, I guess, where he does something and he goes, oh, by Joe, I don't know my own strength. So that was like me being like, oh God, I'm in love with this little man.
He's just so cute. He's one of those like trope, he's that trope where it's like this kind of bumbling old man and you think like, he's, you know, kind of silly, but he's actually like very, very smart and capable. He's just like the definition of book smart, but a little bit like street silly.
Yeah.
I love him.
Kind
He's
of
cute.
like the character in Atlantis. There's an old man character like that too.
Oh, yeah. Just a little whimsical and quirky and silly.
Yeah.
Um,
Should we move on to Vanellope?
okay, so Vanellope Von Schweetz. She is, dare I say, the cutest character, the cutest animated character. She is a little button, and I low key want you to cosplay her because I think you
Ooh.
have the cute little button face for her. And I mean that as a
Okay.
compliment.
Yeah,
She's
I've definitely thought about it. So, mhm.
yay. Yeah, she's very cute. Her so if you haven't seen Wreck-It Ralph, or if you haven't seen it in a while, basically Vanellope is a video game character. She's a video game character in a racing game. and she wants to race, but she's been kind of ostracized from her little kingdom or community because she glitches a lot. And she's been told that that's a bad thing. She's going to like corrupt the game. If she races, everything is going to go wrong. Um, but then later on, we find out that she's only glitching because the king Candy tried to erase her coding, but she is the rightful ruler of the kingdom. And not only that, but she is meant to race. Um, a lot of people like to see Vanellope, and I mean I do too, as someone who's autistic coded because of the tisms, tics, kind of glitches that people relate to as stimming. And while there's some debate about whether this is intentional or not, I think, as we've said in previous episodes, if you resonate with a character for a certain reason and they empower you for that reason, then that's great. If you see yourself in a character, and they validate you or empower you in some way, amazing, fantastic. Even if it's not confirmed by the creators or anything, even if it's just like heavily alluded to but not outrightly confirmed, that's okay too. You know, I think a lot of people look up to Mulan as like a bisexual icon, but no one's confirmed that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
um but to me, Vanellope is definitely disabled or autistic coded because the glitches don't stop by the end of the movie. Like even though everything kind of resolves, the glitches don't go away because one of the lessons and messages that Vanellope learns is that what she comes to learn is that her glitches are like a superpower, that it's not anything to be ashamed of, that they're a part of her now, and she learns how to navigate life with them and use it to her advantage, which is a little nuanced in terms of like, you know, disability coding and talking about disability and autism and things like that. But I hope you understand where I'm trying to go with that, because I do love that the glitches don't go away, because I think it can be seen as an empowering reminder that ticks and stims and, you know, whatever you want to call them, aren't things to be fixed or corrected. You know, that they aren't necessarily a bad thing or make you a bad person or less than a person or um quote unquote decrease your value in any kind of way. So yeah, I just think Vanellope does a really good job of learning to adapt and still fulfill her dreams, which is, and I also like, and I think this is a point actually you brought up, I do like that um she knew and had always known that racing was like her thing, that she was meant to race, and she works really really hard to do it. I'll let you talk more about that because I forgot how to do this one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think like her dreams and aspirations were really inspiring, and I think that's something we can take away from Vanellope is like even though she has been ostracized and has been told like we don't want you to be part of this because you're going to ruin it. You're ruining it for everybody. And being told that she can't do it. She just like knows in her bones that this is what she wants to do, and she knows that she's good at it too, which I think we've talked about in the Merida episode too, is about like giving kids something to feel confident in, because it will help drive them in the future and like let them decide what that thing is. You don't have to pressure them, but like put them in activities, help them decide like what they like and what they want to explore. And like she just decided that she was good at racing, and I think that's really cool because then she was able to sort of pursue that and have big dreams and aspirations about making sure that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of what we talked about earlier with like Jane and Tarzan learning from each other, like Ralph and Vanellope learn a lot from each other.
Mm-hmm.
In like a really great friendship that they build, because he winds up in her game. I do not remember why. He winds up in her game. They discover each other. At first, they don't trust each other because they both have that sort of like, she's been ostracized and he's the villain of his game. And he's like upset that he's found out that he's a bad guy and has to destroy things. And they just like kind of learn to embrace who they are through each other, which is really sweet. And like, again, on theme with what we've been talking about, like the right people who are for you will find you and they'll stick around. Like they found each other. They learned, like Ralph learned that, like, oh, the point of me is to destroy things. And I don't have to be upset about that. Like, that's what makes me who I am. That's what my whole game is about. I'm literally Wreck-It Ralph. Like, my job is to destroy. And he kept seeing that as like this bad thing. And she helped teach him, like, no, because if you destroy things, it helps me rebuild them. And like, she was able to create her race car and like all this stuff. And so it's like they worked together to sort of like discover the best parts of themselves, which I really, really like. And then if we go on to the next movie, if we go on to Ralph Breaks the Internet, it's also like, I know that the movies are called Wreck-It Ralph, but they are equally, like, she is equally as much a main character of these movies as he is. Like, it's really about the two of them together. Because even in Ralph Breaks the Internet, like, they get in a fight. Here's what happens. The plot is that Sugar Rush, which is Vanellope's game, the steering wheel breaks and the game gets like turned off because no one can use the steering wheel. So Ralph doesn't want Vanellope to be without her game, so they go to the World Wide Web and they try to buy a new steering wheel for the game. So that Vanellope's game doesn't get unplugged or whatever. They're like so worried is gonna happen. And in that, Vanellope discovers this game. You know the name of it. I don't remember. It's the Grand Theft Auto
Slaughter Race.
Slaughter Race. There you go. Vanellope's like, Slaughter Race? What's this? And basically discovers this, like, it's 10 times what she could ever do in Sugar Rush. And she makes really good friends with the main character of that game. And Shank, thank you. Yeah, you're remembering all these names. I don't remember anything. Just grand scheme things. And Ralph feels heartbroken because he feels like Vanellope is leaving him behind for someone else. Speaking of jealousy, again. And he's very much like, you know, Vanellope being friends with this person means that she can no longer be friends with me. Which is not true. Your friends can be friends with as many people as they want, and it doesn't take away from their friendship with you as long as they're still showing up intentionally with you in the times that they're with you. Anyway, so I think like following Vanellope's passions is like that decision to like, I'm good at racing. I want to see how much better I can be at racing by doing this like nearly impossible game. And so I really liked that arc of hers in the second movie as well, as sort of like not only like believing in herself and knowing that she could do something, but also seeing something that seems so out of reach and so difficult and still wanting to try it anyway. I think that could be really inspiring too.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I said anything that I said in the first episode, but that's what I meant.
You know what? That's okay. That whatever needed to be said today is being said, and that's all that matters. And it's going to be better than the other one. But to your point about the first movie and the journeys that that Vanellope and Ralph go on, I mean, the like at the big climax of the movie, Ralph has a quote that's I'm bad and that's good. I'll never be good and that's not bad. There's no one I'd rather be than me. And I remember seeing that for the first time and just sobbing. Like, I think anyone going through any kind of identity work or you know, reconnecting with your authentic self, that's such a great quote, mantra, affirmation to just carry around with you. There's no one I'd rather be than me, because and then Winnie the Pooh says this, the things that make me different are the things that make me me, you know, like and then relating that to Tinkerbell when she's trying to essentially become someone she's not, or even Vanellope and being like, I can get my glitches under control, like just accept me, let me race because I can. And I think a lot of autistic people may go through this in masking, right? And how exhausting that can be. Like, I can be a quote unquote normal person. Just let me do this thing. I'll do whatever it takes so that I can fulfill my dream. But they learned that who they are as they are right now is enough, and they will find the people that love and accept them anyway. So
yeah. And I also think we can't talk about Vanellope without bringing up her scene in Ralph Breaks the Internet with all the other Disney princesses. Because that's where we kind of see, so Vanellope, I think, is canon Disney princess because she's the princess of Sugar Rush. So correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure she's like canon Disney princess, although she decides to call herself the president of Sugar Rush rather than
Yeah,
identifying
she's
as a princess.
taking a very democratic approach to
Yes.
her kingdom.
But I do love, first of all, the animations of the princesses in Ralph Breaks the Internet, because we get to see the ones who were more like in a different artistic
2D.
style in,
Yeah.
yeah, like in the style of Wreck-It Ralph. But we also get to see all of their personalities coexisting together, which is kind of fun, and the different dynamics between the princesses. And to see what they think makes a Disney princess, which is
Yes.
like, you know, all the questions that they ask Vanellope about, like, oh, well, did a big strong man come and save you? And it's like, yep, that's what makes me a princess, all right.
Right. Do you have magic hair? No. Magic hands? No. Do animals talk to you? No. Were you poisoned? No. Cursed? No. Kidnapped or enslaved? Are you guys okay? Should I call the police? I love that
So good.
line. I actually looked it up because I do like that scene, and the gosh, what do you call it in a script where it's not dialogue, but it's like the description of like what's happening? Mm.
It does have a word, and my mind is blanking on what it is. Stage directions, maybe?
I just want to highlight this though, because I love how when Vanellope enters or, you know, appears in their room, the different approaches all of them take to defending themselves, which again is just further confirmation that none of the heroines or princesses that we've talked about in this season are damsels in distress. Okay, let's just clear that up right now in case this is the first episode you're listening to. So it says when the girls see her, they defend themselves, including Mulan taking out her sword, Belle holding up her book, Ariel pointing her dinglehopper, Merida pointing her bow and arrow, Pocahontas holding up her cane, which I didn't know she had a cane, but that's okay. Rapunzel holding her frying pan, Elsa holding out her hands, and Anna putting her fists up, Jasmine wielding the magic lamp, and Cinderella taking her glass slipper, breaking it and wielding it like a shiv.
Yes. Oh, that was great. Great
It
moment.
was so funny. What isn't mentioned too is Moana, who has her paddle and she's like ready to.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that scene was really cute and really funny.
Yeah. And they also have like the little sleepover scene where they're all in their pajamas. That one's also really cute.
That one is really cute. Yeah.
I was gonna say, to sum up Vanellope, I think she's really sweet, even though it's in her name. She's sweet and she's cute. There's also a lot of parallels people make to her and Boo from Monsters Inc. Like, they're like, oh, she looks like Boo. So speaking of like cute animation, it's like Boo from Monsters Inc. and then one of the daughters in Despicable Me, which is not a Disney movie, right?
Agnes.
So yeah. So there's a lot of comparisons between those three.
They are really cute. I love it. I also, speaking of the second movie, and I mean, that whole movie about how Ralph breaks the internet is because his insecurities about Vanellope's new friendship with someone else is what causes a virus to spread throughout the entire internet. But I do like that Vanellope does a really good job of reassuring Ralph that just because she's making other friends doesn't mean it takes anything away from him. And I think, you know, I think we were talking about attachment styles a little bit ago, specifically around like jealousy and stuff, but it definitely seems that Ralph has an anxious attachment style with Vanellope and maybe a little bit of codependency. And Vanellope does a really good job of reassuring him in a way that's not condescending or dismissive. Like, she does a really good job of validating his feelings and even being honest about her fears, because she recognizes that if she leaves her game, that's less time with Ralph. But they do a really good job of kind of navigating what turns out to be like a long distance relationship or friendship, you know? And I think it's a really important message for kids to hear, especially like we were talking about in high school, where you're making friends and I don't know, like just figuring yourself out too. and wanting to belong, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be, I don't know, just, included in things. And that's something I could relate to for me in high school, was because I had such overprotective parents and I could never like hang out with my friends. I was never really invited to things, and then I'd hear about them afterward. And that made me feel kind of expendable in a way, or that they weren't really my friends and they didn't really care about me. But I look back on that time, and even though no one had the conversation that Vanellope has with Ralph, I look back on that time and remind myself of all the different ways that they showed up for me during high school, or were my friends, or, just reminding myself that, like, just because they're doing things without me doesn't mean, I mean, even as adults, like, life gets busy, and I have friends who will do things without me. And instead of being like, wow, they don't care about me because they didn't care to like wait for me to be available, or like make it work so that I can be included, it's okay. It's not, that's not what makes a friendship. A friendship is about when you are spending the time together, how that feels. And I think I really like that dynamic between Ralph and Vanellope. And she's so cute and very diplomatic about everything too, which I like.
Yeah. Speaking of diplomats, should we talk about
Captain Amelia? Yes, good segue. Look at you. Captain Amelia from Treasure Planet, which I can't believe you've never seen. Iconic.
I watched like 40 minutes of it for the purposes of this episode when we recorded originally. So that's been like a month now, however long ago that was. However, from my intro of her, I really like her self-assuredness and the way she shows up with confidence as a leader. I think that's really important. I also love the assumption that the captain was going to be a man, and then she swings in and is like, I'm a woman and I'm a cat. Like, I'm not just a woman, I'm also a cat. Like, I was like, oh, very cool.
I thought you were going to say, I'm a woman and I'm the captain. But no, you said, I'm a woman and I'm a cat.
And the captain, all three.
Wow, the perfect trifecta. Look at that. Woman, captain, cat. What else could you need?
No anti-cat propaganda here.
No, we love it. Yeah, I like her a lot. I think she's, like you said, she is the epitome of what it means to be a leader, very confident. I think we talked about this in the original recording, that something we noticed and admired was that respect and command that she has of a room. The crew respects her, even though, spoiler alert, there's like a mutinous revolt, but it's fine. That's not her fault necessarily. But how the crew looks up to her and respects her and treats her like a captain, and they don't care that she's a cat lady. They're like, you're a captain. We don't really care what you look like or who you are, as long as you're a good captain. Because the mutiny that happens has nothing to do with her. The conversation that they have is because they have their own agenda, but has nothing to do with her ability to lead. I like that she is so witty. Her quips. Oh my gosh, there was one.
Have it written down if you'd like to hear it.
Oh my gosh, yes, please.
No, yeah. Well, first of all, I think that Treasure Planet was not written for children because the vocabulary of this movie is vast. They have a very they use a lot of big words. And I was like, okay. But yes, there's a part where Amelia is trying to recap something funny that she had said earlier, where she's like, how did I describe them, Arrow? I said something rather good this morning before coffee. like she just turned to her right hand man and was like, please tell them what I said earlier that was so witty and funny. And then he goes,
that's what I feel like we're doing right now.
Yeah. And then he turns to the people and he's like, a ludicrous parcel of driveling galoots, ma'am. Like, that's what you called them this morning. But also a different point, she's like, saying something, and she's like, it borders on the imbecilic, and I mean that in a very caring way.
Yes, she's very very funny, she has a lot of like witty quips, and I do agree that the vocabulary and language used is a little bit more mature, and maybe that's why it didn't do so well in the box office, because people brought their kids and their kids were like, I have no idea what anyone is saying. But that's why we as either teenagers or now as an adult, if we watch it as children, we can be like, oh, I get it now. And also because we can watch things with subtitles now, so that's
Very
always nice.
helpful.
Very very helpful. But the note I wanted to make about the language used is because if you haven't seen Treasure Planet, it's inspired by Treasure Island by what's his face, I can't remember. So they take like the piratey colonial themes of that time period, but then also interject like space and sci-fi and stuff. So like they're wearing very colonial garb. They drive, I was gonna say drive, pilot like old school pirate ships but in space, and they call like the
Yeah.
different villages ports and things like that. So anyway, if that sounds like your vibe, definitely check it out, because I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going into a sci-fi movie to watch this. Like, I truly didn't. I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, this is a sci-fi film. It was
Yeah,
not marketed as such, at least to my knowledge. Like, I had no idea.
I don't remember either, but it's great. So Captain Amelia is just brave, smart, witty, incredibly intelligent, and just, very kick ass. She's just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, there's a quote that I really like, and it is not from Amelia, though. It is from Jim's mom. Jim's mom says this to Delbert Doppler, um, right before. So he wants to go on this adventure with Jim because Jim discovered the map, and Doppler's going crazy. He's like, whoa, 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 this is exciting. And Jim's mom says, are you saying this because it's the right thing or because you really want to go? And
Yeah.
he goes, I really want to go, but it's also the right thing. Like, I thought that was a really cool, like, quote about, like, taking on something big. Is like, are you just saying this because you really want to do it or because it's, like, the right thing? And it's like, I really want to do it, which I think means that it's the right thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, the movie has so many gems, and for time, because I think you have to go in like 15. Speaking of brave, Eilonwy from the Black Cauldron is also a very, very brave character. Also a legitimate princess. She's very outspoken, feisty, and fearless. I think she's one of the most fearless characters, a very underrated character. I think we were talking about why she isn't considered a true Disney princess, and I think it's because the Black Cauldron did not do well in box offices, and they were like, oop, nope, scrapping her. So, which I
Yeah.
think
I mean,
is
I sent you
travesty.
like a picture of all of the Disney princesses, and her picture was on it, and I was like, who is that? And you were like, oh, I think that's the girl from Black Cauldron. I was like, I didn't even remember what she looked like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um she also has a couple of really great quotes, though. There's a point, another asshole boy that she's entertaining, and he, like, makes fun of her for being a girl, and she's like, girl, if it weren't for this girl, you'd still be in the Horn King's dungeon. And I was like,
Hell yeah.
get it, Eilonwy. You tell him feminism or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. No. That that's really funny. I forgot about that quote. That's a really good one. Not to
um,
skip. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was about to say we got to start talking about Anastasia because
We have a lot to say about Anastasia. Anastasia. Um. Okay, I'll kind of go through my main notes, and then we can, circle back if there's anything that really stands out. But as you know, HB, and as most of the listeners know, a big part of my work is like the healing journey. And what better movie to equate to a healing journey than Anastasia? Like, literally, having to go through a journey, a really hard one at that, to reconnect with like your authentic self or even like your past self, maybe a little bit of inner child work. There I'm stumbling over my words because there are just so many different points of the movie that I was like, that can be related to a healing journey. It can be related to the healing journey. I mean, right off the bat, like her memory, granted, she has like a legitimate head trauma experience, but I think so many people, when they've had traumatic childhoods or um traumas, there is science to prove or show evidence that our memory gets impacted or affected. It's like one of the main parts of the brain that kind of not like loses its power, but memory is definitely something impacted by trauma. And so for her having to like go on this journey to figure out who she is, where she came from, can definitely relate directly, excuse me, to a healing journey. I mean, the whole song that she sings at the very not the very beginning, but after she leaves the orphanage. So there's a song in Anastasia called Journey to the Past, and I'm looking up the lyrics right now because almost every single line can be directly related to a healing journey. So in the first stanza verse, she says, life is full of choices. No one ever mentions fear. I think fear is something we all can come up against or experience on the healing journey, whether it's fear of the unknown, fear of reverting back to who we used to be, and the behaviors, thoughts, and patterns that we're trying to break. The world can seem so vast on a journey to the past. I also really like the second verse. Somewhere down this road, I know someone's waiting. Years of dreams just can't be wrong. Arms will open wide. I'll be safe and wanted. Finally home where I belong. Starting now, I'm learning fast on this journey to the past because I think also too, when we begin our healing journey, when we finally feel ready and our body's like, yes, it's time, all of those like walls and barriers that we've built kind of drop and we just get like flooded with all of these things, which is where I think therapy and coaching can be really helpful because it takes all of the things that are coming to the surface and able to kind of like parse through it and compartmentalize it and make it feel less messy, less heavy. And so I'm a big fan of that kind of work. One step at a time, one hope, then another. Who knows where this road may go? Back to who I was, on to find my future, things my heart still needs to know. That just it's so good because the healing journey, yes, can be very future focused, but you can't necessarily move forward without addressing the things from the past that are still affecting you or the things from the past that you want to bring with you moving forward to the future. So I think that's a really great line. So anyway, just my whole thing is just listen to that song. It's literally a movie about coming home to yourself. What I love about Anastasia is that she's witty, funny, unladylike in the best way, resilient, strong, brave, and hopeful. I think also another thing we see with her is a little bit maybe of hyper independence where she's grown up kind of having to figure things out on her own and do things on her own. But just like a lot of the other stories that we've talked about, she learns how to ask for help. And much like Raya, actually, she learns how to trust other people because it seems like she definitely grew up in a children's home slash orphanage, possibly, where the caretaker was very mean and giving Anastasia a lot of reasons to not trust herself or that there must be something wrong with Anastasia. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love her so much. And like the reason we didn't give her a full episode is because like she's not technically a Disney princess. And also like the only reason it's on Disney Plus now is because Disney bought out whatever
Everything.
her original company was. So it's like technically not a Disney heroine, but also technically kind of yes. But I've always loved Anastasia. Like she's so badass and sassy and funny um and you know something that we like to say about like not being damsels in distress or whatever is that like she ends up being the one who saves the day in the end from Rasputin, which again, I can't believe they named a villain Rasputin, but here we are. I think I said this in the original episode, but like Anastasia is how I remembered Rasputin's name when we were learning about him in high school. But anyway, and also Bartok was my favorite character growing up, probably would still be my favorite character if you asked me now.
Yeah.
I had a plush of him where when you squeezed his belly, it said, "I'll give him a hug and a high and a," or whatever he says. So yeah, I love Bartok. And I think that Anastasia is just like a really awesome character to look up to. Like there's a lot of power, and of course she's learning and she's growing throughout this journey, but there's still such a lot of power in that journey too, that like at the end of the day, she is the one who saves the day. She saves Dimitri. She's also really like has a really funny relationship with Dimitri because he like lied to her, and then and all this stuff is like their relationship is funny as well. Like when she says don't talk anymore, okay, it's only going to upset me, like that really just is the funniest.
When she's like, do you really think I'm royalty? And he's like, yeah, of course. And she's like, then stop bossing me around.
Yes, exactly. Like so gold. Like Anastasia is just gold. So we have nothing but praise for this movie, for her journey, and for the things that it can like teach you about growth and independence and yourself and all of that beautiful stuff.
I mean, the quotes that I wrote down that I love from the movie, the one about do you think I'm royalty, then stop bossing me around. But also there's nothing for you back there, because she's torn between moving forward and going to Paris to possibly find her family, or going back to St. Petersburg where there isn't really anything for her there except what she knows, which isn't really a lot. So she's kind of torn between kind of diving into the unknown or just going back to what feels familiar and comfortable. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to on any kind of journey where they're trying to break cycles or grow or develop themselves, or just become a different, I don't want to say a different person as if like healing means becoming a completely different person, but I think any journey where you're trying to move forward, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then I think this is the last line of the movie, but then also a quote I wrote down is like, no, it's a perfect beginning. Because I think at the end, the Duchess's handmaiden person is like, wow, what a perfect ending. And the grandma's like, no, this is a perfect beginning. Because like what you said a little bit ago for a different heroine, HB, is that like there's not so much an after as there is like you still have to maintain it, you know, like you can reach a goal, but then there's still things to be done afterward. And so I think just like on a healing journey, you might find yourself in a different and maybe quote unquote better place, but the work that comes with the healing journey doesn't just stop once you're no longer activated by a thing. That's not to say that there's always more to be done in like a hustle culture capitalistic sense, but I do think it's like you have to maintain how far you've come.
Yeah, and that it's not linear. I think that's the other thing that we have touched on before, but like can really hammer in here at the end of this episode is like people think of success or healing or really any journey as an upward trajectory, as like a linear line that's like, when I reach the top, I will be fully healed, or I will be XYZ, whatever it is that's at the top, right? But that's not what the journey is like. The journey is a big squiggly line. It's a big winding road. It's all up and down and all around. And like, there will be days where you feel great, and there will be days when you don't. And there will be a day where you feel like you're on the other side of something and you finally come out of it. And then there will be times when it hits you and it's not. It's the same with grief. It's the same with body image. It's like anything that you're going through, it is not linear. And getting through it and getting to the other side of it doesn't always mean that you're always going to be there. There will be moments of slips and slides and ups and downs, and we don't share that to scare you and be like, I will never be on the other side of this, but just to remind you that like we are human, and humans get triggered, humans go through things, like, you know, and it's, you know, getting to or through the hard thing is great, but it's, again, we have to maintain it and keep going to therapy, keep doing the work, whatever it is that makes you feel like you're putting in whatever effort you need to put in to stay on the other side of it.
And I think it's actually an encouraging reminder that there is no deadline, you know, that healing is a lifelong journey and a lifelong process. So like you have times, there's no pressure to have it all figured out by a certain time or be your highest, most enlightened self by a certain time. That like, give yourself time, give yourself grace, be patient with yourself, trust the process, and all of the other cliches that I can throw out at you.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up this episode about our other strong heroines. Unlike any of our previous episodes, because we did a bunch at once. But we want to thank you for sticking around for this season and for supporting us and getting us to our other strong heroines. Next week we have our roundtable, and then
whoop, whoop.
That's it for season 1. We did it.
That's so wild. Yeah.
Thank you all. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebin_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.